views and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
Just lift your eyes up, let your wise rise up. See the signs of the times. If it's time, rise up, rise up. When death and hell dwell among all God's people, when those we chose and trusted have become completely corrupted and inherently evil, when the feast that feeds you starves our father's children, when snuff, porn, and pedo forms begin to get top billing, rise up. When famine claims millions, when justice gives blind eyes to billions, when the Lord's anger is no longer feared, if his protection is gone and your enemies are near, if you've seen the seas spill over and the mountains shake, break, and fall, if the moon ever turns blood red and you can't see the sun at all, rise up. No matter if the prize is high.
And welcome to New Abolitionist Radio on the Black Talk Radio Network, a program that seeks to educate, inform, and agitate on the issue of 21st century legalized slavery. Hosted by social activist and spoken word poet Max Parthas, with New Abolitionist and actionist Yohanan Elia and Black Talk Media Project founders Scotty Reed. On this program, we discuss recent news on legalized 21st century slavery and human trafficking, along with projects and people who help combat it. Today is the April 26th broadcast of New Abolitionist Radio. We are nearing the 100-day mark of a full white supremacy coup. On this day in history, the world's worst nuclear power plant accident occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Soviet Union during 1986. The literal translation of the word Chernobyl is Wormwood. Tonight we'll be joined by activists involved in tomorrow's rally and march called Stop the Raids in New York, where authorities are using RICO charges to indiscriminately raid homes and round up people of color. If they get away with it now, Chi-Town best beware for worse. Our list of potential stories to cover include a re-examination of Wisconsin's human rights crisis as a world leader in mass incarceration and institutional racism. It is necessary after prosecutors say that a Milwaukee County jail officers cut off an inmate's water for 7 consecutive days before the man died of dehydration. Wisconsin is Ferguson. Also from the LA Times, we share a very important court infighting hearing where judges say there is an epidemic of prosecutorial misconduct, where prosecutors have presented false evidence but were never investigated or disciplined. We want to share the story of 5'4", 18-year-old Graham Dyer, who was left brain dead by a 2013 encounter with the Mesquite police. The tapes have come out, and the monstrous brutality that these officers displayed is beyond belief. Until recently, those tapes were kept secret. It's official. The SCOTUS has weighed in and made a verdict. Police can now shoot an unarmed man in the back. And if they say it was necessary, with no proof at all, there is no need for a trial. In essence, making a statement akin to papal infallibility, police ex cathedra. A study that should be titled, What Black People Done Already Told Us, published in the American Journal of Public Health, found that delinquent non-Hispanic whites are more likely to abuse hard drugs such as cocaine or opiates than their black counterparts. After 12 years of research, they found that whites were more than 30 times likely to have cocaine use disorders, 50 times more likely to develop opiate use disorder, and 18 times more likely to have PCP use disorder than blacks. In another study that should have the same title, researchers determined that nearly 40% of the U.S. prison population, 576,000 human beings, are behind bars with no compelling public safety reason. This, according to a new report from the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law. In time, if time allows, we'll tell you about the sinister, inhuman way prison officials are using women-specific sanitary needs as bargaining chips in rapes, molestations, and abuses. These well-documented stories include Rose M. Singer Center on the infamous Rikers Island, where about 600 women usually are in prison, and Alabama's Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women. We'll also have our regular segments, which include the Abolitionist in Profile, which is William Still today, October 7th to July 14th, 1821, 1902. Our writer of the 21st Century Underground Railroad, who is Rodriguez Crawford, and our new segment, For Freedom's Sake, A History of Rebellion, Remembering Gabriel's Conspiracy of 1800. If you got a question or a comment, just call us toll free at 866-510-9025. And you can log in and chat with others and us by going to uberconference.com/Black Talk Radio Network. Once again, I'm Max Parthas, and I'm about out of breath. What's happening, brother Scotty Reed?
Hey, what's up, Max? Good to talk to you again today, man.
Yeah, man. It's always a good time to be here because, I just feel like a witness. You know what I mean? Like, I could testify, brother. You could testify. Johanna could testify. And so you just get to see the change and the times and the events. And if you have that forward vision, you can see things unfolding and where they're going.
I do have a quick note. We had a last-minute change in our guests. We were supposed to be joined by abolitionists who is on a prison plantation right now, but they would not approve the 866 number, and I should have sent them the 704 number for our conference line, and maybe they would not have picked up on the fact that it was a conference line. But we did find a replacement. Tag, who is a Black Talk Media Project contributor, will be joining us, but we'll also be joined by Ren, who is a member of the international, what is it, the IWOC? I forget what that stands for.
Yes.
Was it the International Workers, what?
Yes, here, I'll put it in New Abolitionist Radio so we can all see it.
But this person is also a Bronx 120 supporter. And this is a story we have reported on from the beginning on this program, as well as I've done some commentaries talking about RICO charges being abused to target young people in Black and brown communities. And as we pointed out from the Ferguson report, that RICO charges is what the NYPD should be charged with for running a criminal conspiracy to raise revenue for the city. So those brothers, I'm assuming that Ren is a brother, but they will be joining us here in just about 10 minutes, a little less than 10 minutes.
Okay, no doubt. That's the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee.
Thank you, Max. I forgot the acronym.
Indeed, brother. Like I was just saying, we're witnesses to seeing these things manifest. An Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, just that idea that one exists now. You need to try to unionize prisoners because they're being exploited in order to enrich international private for-profit corporations and companies is akin to what happened back, I think it was in the early 1900s, where they had a conflict between slave laborers using convict leasing at the time and the Appalachian miners that ended up in a massacre.
Yeah, man. So I tell you, man, I was really depressed over the past couple of days, but I was looking forward to tonight's program because this program really, I believe, just really gives me a purpose, man, and what I feel like my main calling is, which is abolitionism.
Yeah, man, I'm with you, brother, all the way, Sagittarius, born around the same time, kind of straight to the point type guys. So for me, after studying this tree for so long, I just want to go for the roots. I'm tired of messing with the pruning branches. You know what I mean? I'm just tired of pruning branches. This thing has got to come up the roots and all. It's got to end. And from our perspective, and what is quickly becoming the perspective of many, many others across the globe, is that slavery abolition is the answer to that. And there's even a series of things that we need to achieve, which we have been doing now, as you've been tuning in for the past 5 years, achieving the goals we set out to do in order to solve this problem.
Max, if you could remind me about our last week's guest and when the election is.
It's David Comer for Congress, and I believe the election is the 20th, but it may be the 17th. I'll look it up, but I'm pretty sure
next month
of June.
Oh, okay, of June. Oh, okay, because I had seen that there was a election in the 3rd district of South Carolina, some kind of special election, and I knew he was in the 5th district, but I wasn't sure when they were supposed to vote on that.
Yeah, we got some elections going on here in South Carolina where one congresswoman or potential congresswoman did a commercial where she was standing there with an assault rifle doing this. I don't know what the hell it was supposed to be, man, but it was just so South Carolina. Like, you see us, our white women will shoot you. That's how we roll.
Wow.
It's crazy, man. It is crazy here in South Carolina. You know, we had to deal with some things for sure. I'm looking forward to hearing from TAG as well as the representatives from IWOC who we have worked with before here on New Abolitionist Radio, including in the prison labor work strike. Again, these are historical things, people. The largest slavery rebellion in the history of the United States didn't happen pre-1865. It happened here in this age. Man, right. You know what I mean? Where workers organized across the country in prisons and managed to go on strike simultaneously to the point where California alone was, to the best records that I've heard, losing hundreds of millions of dollars in labor.
Mm. Well, let me give some more background. We should be joined by our guests at any moment now. If you are one of the guests and you're on the line, hit star to unmute yourself, because I'm not sure what your phone numbers would be, and we have other people on the board. But there's going to be a rally and a march tomorrow in New York City. It's called Stop the Raids. You can find out more information by going to Bronx120.org. Also, check out RicoReform.org. And so you can join parents and community members as they rally and march at City Hall against the NYPD and federal gang raids and the RICO conspiracy charges that followed. Families in poor neighborhoods are being targeted by militarized raids and conspiracy laws. Young people of color are being over-prosecuted, often based on where they live, how they dress, and who they grew up with. Raids and RICO conspiracy charges won't solve violence. Community-based solutions will. And again, I remember when this story first came out, we actually had a mother whose son was a target of these raids where, you know, she described it as a war zone, as, you know, they launched flashbang grenades into the house and came in, you know, like terrorists and just really terrorized that family. Her son wasn't even there. He was living with his father at the time, and, you know, it was just her and her two minor daughters, and it was just, I mean, just listening to her describe that scenario, I mean, I just really couldn't imagine, because I've never been through anything like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. We got somebody on the line.
Yeah, this is Ren from IWOC, Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee. I'm a comrade of TAG.
Abolitionist Radio. Welcome to New Abolitionist Radio. Can you hear us?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can. Sorry, I'm just in a bit of a public space right now, unfortunately.
All right.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a bit of update on the Bronx 120 case, if that's all right. So some of us this past week, and it's ongoing for a couple more weeks. A lot of people are taking plea deals right now. And we actually were at a sentencing of 3 gentlemen yesterday, and I just don't know how to describe the sentencing, but just incredibly brutal. You know, people's families, you know, children, their mothers, their loved ones there. The court just being their lawyers are white. The judge is like an old white dude, you know, and you just can't. And there's no explanation for this system but white supremacy, you know, and the fact that people are getting criminalized for who they associate with. Young black and brown men, you know. One of the gentlemen, he has been incarcerated for over a year now, and he just got released. They just released him, which is really joyful. His family was present, but at the same time, it's brutal to think this person lost a year of their life for absolutely nothing, you know. And other young men of this case and other cases like this are just, you know, losing their lives, their connections to loved ones, by being incarcerated like this, you know.
Well,
yes,
I do believe we're joined by Tag, but let me just say this. She said, Ren, you said you don't know how to describe it other than white supremacy. I can find another term: slavery. There's a slave catcher. Yeah, this is slave catching in the modern era of slavery and human trafficking. But I want to make sure that is Tag joining us. Tag, do we have you calling in from 646?
Yes, it's me. It's everyone.
Peace and welcome again, New Abolitionist Radio, Tag. We're looking forward to hearing the stories, sharing it with our audience, and the events of tomorrow, and how people can get involved and help.
Yeah. If we could, just for those who haven't, because this has not been a story that has really been covered by mainstream media. So if we could get you, Tag, or Ren, whichever one, to give the listeners who may not have heard about the case a brief overview.
Yes, definitely. I'll try my best. As y'all are aware, you know, this is a huge issue and very involved. So I'll do my best to give an overview. But essentially, a year ago tomorrow, over 700 slave catchers representing 6 different slave catching entities descended on the Bronx, particularly the Eastchester area of the Bronx, for a terrorist raid, under the pretense of cracking down on gang activity. And it was hailed as the largest so-called gang crackdown in New York City history, at 120 individuals, primarily black youths. And in the wake of that act of terror, you have now many of those individuals still incarcerated, mostly at the 2 federal detention centers or federal facilities in New York, MDC and MCC, as well as the fact that many individuals, family members, and particularly mothers of those who were captured are now facing any number of issues, whether it be, facing eviction from their homes is one of the main issues that heads are dealing with right now, particularly those who live in the housing projects throughout the city, that and the main housing projects that were targeted in these raids, which have a permanent exclusion clause with respect to the lease. That means that if one is arrested that lives in your household, they essentially force you or coerce you into signing a document that promises that that you will not allow that person back into your household or back on the premises of the housing project, period, which is leading to, eviction. So that's the racial displacement slash just, low income individuals aspect of it, the displacement of those, who are the most financially vulnerable, in this city. So that's a part of the larger displacement project that's going on throughout the city, and that's one of the main issues involved in this case. But again, there are many issues around this. The fact that the feds create these near impossible bars and barriers with respect to fighting these cases, which is of course leading to a lot of plea deals and individuals basically just feeling completely helpless in the face of the full terroristic brunt of the state targeted because of their racial classifications and because of their income bracket.
I have been reading some of the information coming out of the loop here, and as you said, like this goes back. I've got one article in front of me that goes back to January, where they were saying these military-style raid is an outgrowth of the NYPD's new precision tactics, and they were adopted at the NYPD's use of stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in 2013, and it places gangs and crews right directly in the department's crosshairs. And, back in the day, we used to have crews, but they were like hip-hop crews. It's this criminalization often of Black life. And I'm looking at another article where they have these faces of the people that they're publicly saying are criminals, and they're going to hunt them down here. And every single one of these faces is a Black face. It's like you can't find a white face in the bunch. It just doesn't exist. They have their official version, of course, saying that residents are relieved that these wild, crazy criminals are out. And as you said, this is a narrative that they're putting on to people in order to, continue their genocide.
Yeah, and
sometimes I get a loss of word of some of this stuff there, Scotty.
Yeah, I remember some of the stories I had read, like a couple of the victims were actually in college. At the time, and they were being charged just based on, affiliations they had when they were still in the city, where you did have some gang members who were convicted of manslaughter or murder. That's where the RICO came in, and these people had already served their time. But then all these years later, here they come charging everyone, even those with no knowledge of it, with under RICO, criminal conspiracy. And so
he used the right words with slave catcher.
Tag knows the language. He knows the correct language.
Because it puts it in perspective, man. They're just raiding people's houses and snatching Black people up and throwing them in jail cells. This is very familiar. This is not like a new thing that we've just seen for the first time. And that's where we have to really come in agreement nationally. Yeah, what it is we're dealing with. This is terrible, man. Chi-Town is next, I think.
Another thing that Tag just pointed out that I find particularly troubling is the restrictions on public housing. And we can go back to the Clinton administration working with a Republican Congress with what do they call it? The Welfare Reform Act. And where, people, if they get a drug conviction or anything like that, they're barred permanently from public housing or, even visiting their family members. But I mean, this is like collective punishment of the family members for what someone has allegedly done. And again, I'm looking at this as punishment. If Tag is correct when he said that all it took was an arrest, well, a arrest shouldn't be the same as a conviction. but again, this dispels this notion that you're innocent until proven guilty. When in reality, it's the reverse. It's guilty until proven innocent. Ren, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, as you said, these strategies, this has been an ongoing legacy. And, since the Bronx 120 case a year ago, there's just been more and more raids in New York City. There was a raid last week around in the Bronx and the Boston Secor houses. And it just goes to show that, the police state thinks that the strategy, no one's going to challenge these strategies. So it's really important for us to organize and show our presence and support for these people that are incarcerated in this really fucked up system.
Word. Scotty, any questions?
If I could just expand on something that you mentioned, Brother Scotty. It's a two-part, but you were highlighting these restrictions around public housing. For one, I think it's important to note, for those that, I don't know if this is the case in other cities or, in other regions with respect to public housing, but there's essentially total surveillance with respect to public housing in New York City at this point. And, it's been going on for a very long time, and it's only ratcheted up. It's exemplified in cases like the Bronx 120 case, where you have teenagers and younger who have had their social media and otherwise surveilled for years and years. The level of social media, quote unquote, evidence that's being used in this case and others is extremely alarming and disturbing. The notion that you have slave catchers trolling young people's social media accounts, posing as, other individuals, etc., in order to basically try to implicate them in crimes or connect them with, these street families, so-called gangs. There are floodlights that are 24 hours a day, at the entrances of public housing all throughout the city. It's insane, the level of repression and surveillance with all of that goes on in the city in general. It is exponentially worse with respect to public housing in the city. We were alerted to the fact that recently an initiative was put out to give so-called free tablets to young people in certain targeted public housing facilities. This is the kind of thing that basically allows the state to put its foot in the door and to monitor children and young people in these public housing facilities. And just one other point about how long in the making, these terrorist raids, are, and, the strategic value with respect to the state and the slave catchers is this question of so-called nuisance abatement, which is another form of state repression utilizing slave catchers to get into the homes of individuals in low-income areas, primarily Black individuals. This was also targeting the Bronx just a few years ago, where they were claiming that, untoward activities were occurring in people's residence, and just essentially summarily evicting them from the area so that they can investigate. This tactic was exposed by a ProPublica investigation that recently got an award for it. So that got exposed just a few years ago. And as you mentioned, the stop and frisk tactics got exposed, even though that's still going on. and now they're onto these massive terroristic raids, on our communities.
How much do you feel is this a retaliation for the lawsuit against New York City that resulted in a federal judge ruling stop and frisk was unconstitutional? And I did hear you when you said that it's still going on. But it was my opinion that this was a retaliation against communities of color because they fought back against stop and frisk.
Absolutely. It's a retaliation, but at the same time, it's just an expression of the unbroken line of terrorism of our communities in New York City. And of course, we know this is happening all throughout the country. But, if it wasn't stop and frisk, then it would be the so-called nuisance abatement. Then it would be the so-called gang raids. The fact is, and y'all have reported on it numerous times, that when the NYPD did their so-called, strike or whatever, they were costing the city $10 million plus per week in revenue. So the fact is, slave catching is clearly one of the primary means of revenue generation in the city, and they're well aware of that, and they don't show any signs of trying to stop doing what they're doing, because it's earning them revenue, and it's making sure that a population that has always been targeted in this city and across this country are under constant pressure and are constantly in fear of being caught by slave catchers.
There was an article that came out from NPR, which I have shared on New Abolitionist Radio, where they were talking about these blocks in New York that are called $1 million blocks. And it says the New York-based Justice Mapping Center has been providing these kinds of visuals for more than a decade by mapping the residential addresses of every inmate in various prison systems. The center was made vividly clear a concept called $1 million blocks, areas where more than $1 million is being spent annually to incarcerate the residents of a single census block. People wouldn't be in poverty if that million was going elsewhere. They wouldn't be more liable to be participating in crimes and doing whatever they need to do in order to make ends meet in such areas if that $1 million was spent on education as youths, if it was spent on deterrents such as places where they could go and occupy their time and bring out their artists or scientific or craftsman side and explore different fields of education, they wouldn't have these problems. But you would rather spend $1 million on a single block to put them in prison and jail than to help them stay out of it. That says a lot for everybody listening right there. How many different organizations came together to make this happen? Seven different organizations, government organizations, which means that at any moment they could even apply the Patriot Act to this.
I do believe that the feds were involved as well. And I just want to make the point. I just want to make the point to people that these raids occurred while Attorney General Loretta Lynch was still in office, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, I just wanted to point that out because people have a tendency to play partisan games when our oppression and slavery has always been a bipartisan affair, and it has had support from members of both the dominant political parties in this country.
We've seen what the New York Police Department has attempted to justify as regular policing in their community. And we do not call that policing. We call that genocide. What happened to Eric Garner, what happened to Ramali Graham, what happened to Sean Bell, what happened to Diallo and so many others is not normal everyday policing. I did a video recently called All We Want to Do Is Be Free, where we had the reports from the New York police who came on national news and said, we're out hunting people, and these are the people we're hunting to fill quotas. And it also has the testimony of people who were being arrested, like a Khalif Browder, and sent into places like Rikers Island. This really just got to end. It's constitutional violations that have gone so far out of the box that we don't even have a constitution in place anymore. There's no Sixth Amendment rights, no Eighth Amendment rights, no Fourth Amendment rights. What the hell are we dying for in wars if we don't have that? And you're paying taxes for police forces who are not there to defend or protect you. They're there to hunt you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else you guys want to say, and tell people where to meet you tomorrow in order to be a part of this march and rally, and what you're hoping to expect out of this?
Yeah, so the rally will be outside of City Hall starting at 3. Then we'll make our way at 4 p.m. to the Attorney General office. And then at 5, we will be outside of MTC prison. And maybe Chad could speak a bit about what we're hoping to get out of this.
Definitely. One of the things certainly is just to continue to raise awareness around this issue. Much respect to Black Talk Radio Network in general and New Abolitionist Radio, and the handful of other programs out there that have really covered this issue. Unfortunately, but as we should expect, the dependent corporate mainstream media outlets are not, or stopped covering it after the extremely sensational reports that flooded the news on the day of the raid itself. Since then there has been complete silence on this issue. So certainly raising awareness about the Bronx 120, raising awareness about these raids more generally in New York City, because as was mentioned, these kinds of raids are happening in other places in the U.S., and it's less familiar terrain for those of us in New York City. It's just been these past few years that they've been employing this particular tactic to try and enslave as many of us as possible. So definitely to raise the awareness on these issues, to raise awareness around carceral slavery more generally, and to continue to connect with others who are fighting against it. Those are the things that I'm expecting and looking out for. So anyone that's in the area that is able to will be out there tomorrow, and we will continue to be fighting against these raids and these terroristic tactics on the part of New York City slave catchers.
Bronx 120.
Yeah, I want to discuss a possible solution, which we saw, a lawsuit filed in the past against NYPD in New York City over stop and frisk. And I feel like that can become a valuable tool, as we reported on, I think it was the Southern Poverty Law Center that attacked a bail bonds company and suing them in federal court on RICO charges. We also saw, in kind of unrelated, but we saw a anti-cannabis organization use RICO laws to shut down a legal pot dispensary in Colorado. The business that they targeted with that RICO lawsuit just simply did not have the funds to fight the lawsuit, so they never even opened their doors. So, but I feel like if we can gather the appropriate evidence, that perhaps, we could flip the script and file RICO charges on police departments like the NYPD, because I believe it is organized crime, and they have given us the evidence with their little petulant childlike work stoppage to just because the mayor said he had to talk to his black son about police, and they did the work stoppage and the city lost $10 million. Then you also have on video, it was a news report where you had about 9 different NYPD slave catchers admit that that's what they were doing. They said that we're the hunters and you're the prey, and we're forced to go out and meet these quotas. So I feel like perhaps, someone in those affected areas that will have standing in the courts would be well advised to flip the script and charge these departments under RICO in civil lawsuits. Any thoughts on that? Anybody?
Yeah, definitely. As y'all have pointed out, these slave catching operations really do need to be put up on RICO charges themselves, rather than taking people down, encaging people behind so-called RICO activity under completely flimsy evidence and cases. So I absolutely agree with you. And in fact, some of the lawyers that we've managed to speak with around this over the past year or so have spoken toward, if not that specific tactic, some of the kind of longer term legal strategies that may be possible, as they continue to violate people in this way, as people become more aware of it, actually challenging them on the legal level. But I would just mention, because we were down at the courthouse just 2 days ago, just yesterday, for court support around members of the Bronx 120 who had sentencing. And in that same federal courthouse, they were also sentencing a few former slave catchers behind this ongoing corruption scandal that, quiet as kept, is continuing out here, even though, we're not really being flooded with information about that the way that we are, in these cases, around so-called gangs or these street families, but this corruption that has been going on is, of course, constant and deep-seated. And you had NYPD commanders, involved in corruption, bribery, etc., and people basically fast-tracking guns to their friends or to those that would pay them or buy them jewelry or what have you. But even though conspiracy was mentioned in those charges, I didn't see anything about trying to try them under RICO as as a gang or as a corrupt association, looking into the fullness of the impact of their actions, and following up and investigating and indicting those individuals that they got these weapons to, etc. So just in short, as we know, it's as much a question of the actual implementation as it is to a question of the laws on the books. So while it's clear as day that these are corrupt organizations and should be put up on RICO charges, it's a tall order and a long-term strategy that to me is very worthwhile, while we on the daily end continue to combat this thing any way we can.
Yeah,
with the combined, go ahead, Scotty.
I'm sorry, Max. I just want to say, yes, it's very worthwhile. We first theorized about that after the Ferguson report. And how long was it, Max? About a year later, the Southern Poverty Law Center actually tried that case or filed that lawsuit. Was it in Mississippi or Alabama against that Bell's Bonds company, and was able to shut them down?
Yes, under RICO charges, 110 cities they had to vacate from providing services for profit probation company.
So I think it is a very worthwhile, proven strategy. You know, perhaps someone could consult with the Southern Poverty Law Center and look at that case and how they argued it in court and adopt that strategy across the nation. You know, I theorize about these things. I just wish that I was in a place where I had standing to file such a lawsuit, but I'm not. I live in a rural country area where, you know, I might not see a slave catcher in a month. So, you know, I don't have standing there, you know, to file these type of lawsuits, but especially, you know, the families that's being evicted because of this and the communities that's being disrupted. I just really feel like they would be well served to look into that. Max, did you have something?
I'm in agreement with you, Scotty. This reminds me so much of Germany, you know, when they were looking for the Jews, going to people's houses, trying, you have Jews here? Where's the Jews? That's what they're doing here now with us. These are crimes against humanity, and they're only getting worse and getting ramped up because we're letting them get away with it. And as Frederick Douglass explained to us, you'll find out the limits of what people are able to put up with by just watching. And we're just putting up with this like it's okay, like we don't have any rights. Like you can violate our rights all day long, and it's okay as long as the public feels safe. You don't even have to be a bad person. You could just be labeled a bad person, and that makes them feel safer when they throw your ass in prison for profit. And then we find out later, after the fact, that people like Rudy Giuliani were working directly with the prison companies, and his law firm now represents them as lobbyists, like right now.
Right.
$1 million blocks.
So again, we want to encourage our listeners who are in the NYC area to please show your support tomorrow. As the information was given out, that will be tomorrow at 3:00 p.m. on the steps of City Hall. And then they will march to the U.S. Attorney's Office at 4:00 p.m. And there's also going to be a rally outside the MCC at 5:00 p.m. And this has been endorsed by several organizations: Reform RICO, Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, who Ren is representing on this call, the Coalition to End Broken Windows, Why Accountability, Cop Watch Patrol Unit, El Grito de Sunset Park, Universal Zulu Nation, NYC Campaign for Community Control Over the Police, the Answer Coalition, ICE Free NYC, and BYP 100 NYC, No Separate Justice, Mikasa Nu Asu Casa, Flo Harlem. So definitely they have a lot of grassroots support. Not surprising, some of the more well-known names of civil rights organizations are missing from the list, but I'm not surprised there. But, you know, I just want to thank Ren and Tag for the work that they are doing up there in NYC in relation to the Bronx 120, but in general against towards abolishing modern-day slavery and human trafficking. I want to give you both an opportunity to give us some final comments as we get ready to conclude this segment. We'll start with the lady first. Ren, would you leave us with some final comments?
Yeah, just to add to what Tag and everyone else said, you know, there's still a lot of work to be done. Legally, organizing-wise, if there's anyone in the NYC area that wants to get in touch with us, our email is iwoc.nyc@riseup.net. That's all.
No doubt. And I would just add or further emphasize the fact that this is just one expression of the overall targeting and war on families, on Black communities, non-white communities. Mm-hmm. The fact that you are, or the state rather, is attempting to criminalize associating with your neighbors, with your classmates, with your peers and family members, and not just in this context in New York City, but in LA and in Chicago and in many other places. These efforts are extremely dangerous for all of us, and it's just being supported by the propaganda campaigns that are constant. You know, I was just reading an article from a few years ago in which the Daily News attempted to identify 8-year-olds playing in the park in a housing project as quote unquote future gangbangers. You know, so this type of targeting and criminalization does not seem to have any floor as far as age is concerned. They're targeting, you know, the most vulnerable of our communities, and we have to put a stop to it any way that we can, because, you know, it's our lives that are at stake out here. So I would end it there. There are just so many issues involved in this case. But I really appreciate you know, the fact that y'all are covering it so well. And you know, I would just close with William Lloyd Garrison's words, which are no compromise with slavery, no union with slaveholders.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both. And I know, Tag, that, you know, you are a Black Talk Media Project contributor, and you'll keep us updated so that we can bring the any new information to our listeners. But I want to wish you both a pleasant evening.
Thank you so much.
Much appreciated.
Have a peace and always comrades. Good luck tomorrow. Make it happen, man. Bring the attention that is necessary. Speak truth to power.
No doubt, no doubt.
What did he say, Scotty? Our lives are on the line. Our lives depend on this. That's really how it is out there right now. You talking about military-style raids,
right?
Barging into people's grandmother's house, knocking down doors with guns pointed in children's faces. Where is Leroy? Where is Leroy? There's no Leroy in here. There's a Leroy here. Boom. That's how it goes.
You know, this is why earlier today I made a post in BTR community and on Facebook about, I'm just really tired of the slavery metaphors when we got real slavery staring at us right in the face and bearing down on our communities, and have been so uninterrupted, perhaps for a short period of time after the Civil War. But once they got the black codes in place and the for-profit prisons in place, and let the generals, the former Confederate generals, write the 13th Amendment, you know, it's been in full force in effect in this country. And I really do not like people saying things like, you know, we got these wage slaves. Oh, really? You getting paid $1 a day or 2 cents an hour for your work? Are you really a wage slave, or are you just saying that for dramatic effect? Are you really a slave to technology, or are you just addicted to technology? You know, I'm just really tired of the metaphors about slavery while these people, you know, are suffering on the modern day prison plantations.
Right. You got the nerve to use the word, but not recognize it when you see it. That is like, wow, dude. You know what I mean?
But that's the power of propaganda. Like Tag was speaking on the role of you know, media in sensationalizing these stories and helping to criminalize kids, you know, young children. But as I will point out to people, when did the media not play a role in slavery, in perpetuating slavery and white supremacist ideology? When has mainstream media not played a role?
You're absolutely right, Scotty. It's always had to been people coming from the underground to give an alternative narrative of what was really going on the ground. Like some of the newspapers of the day, for instance, The Liberator, of course, and the Black Chronicles, which I happen to have a copy of all of their headlines all the way back to the 1600s. I look at them often for a first-hand perspective of the times, too, to better understand it. But, I want to give a shout-out, to also the Village Voice Radio. I was just listening to them the other day out there, and they were discussing the difference between prison reform and prison abolition, and I reached out to them and asked them if they would throw in slavery abolition there, too. I have a discussion about that. I think they'll be talking about it next week. But this week they were just talking about prison reform and prison abolition. But here's the part where you fits in what you were saying about how you were so upset. I feel the same way, but I understand that we all got to figure it out eventually. We're just so frustrated right now that people ain't on board just yet. Like, I heard the brothers talk knowingly about what's going on with these jails and prisons. They even referred to it as slavery. But then they started talking about what can we do to reform it or fix it. And that's that double thing that, happens, because if you're talking about reforming it or fixing it, you are by default legitimizing.
That's what they did with the 13th Amendment, Max. I'm sorry to interrupt, but isn't that what the 13th Amendment represents? A reform of slavery or really a reset?
A reset. It was to the point where it was going to die. Global opinion was against it. They were fighting a damn war where 600,000 people had died in a bloody war. They had to do something. And that was too powerful and profitable a demon to just let go and die off. And as abolitionists of the time and sense have said, if you just leave a little seed in the ground of slavery, it's going to grow back up. And we've watched that in our lifetime happen. In just 45 years, we've watched slavery be reborn, not just in America, but globally. That's all it takes.
Yes, and it is global. The Curation Corporation, now known as Core Civic, and the Geo Group are global companies. They're just not operating private prisons for profit here in the United States. They're operating them globally, as we spoke about last week, with the Green Party being an international political organization. And I really do hope that, remind me his name again, David, right?
David Comer.
Yeah, David Comer. And him and Greg, I hope they are successful in making that part of the Green Party's platform.
Somebody needs to make it a platform. You got Cornel West now telling us we should follow Bernie and let him lead a new party of some sorts. But, to me, those two are Judas goats. I'm not following either one of them nowhere. Here at New Abolitionist Radio, we were hands-on involved with what was going on regarding the conversation about mass incarceration coming from the Sanders camp and modern-day slavery. We lobbied them personally. Went to their events, talked to their people, talked to their managers, helped to get legislation put into play. And then at the end of the day, we had just been used, really, because they never had any intention of fighting for it. It was like just throwing bones out to a hungry dog. Here's a bone, hush it, hush it. And that's what I felt like at the end of the day. I'm not following either one of those cats. When you're talking about making a new party, and then you're saying, okay, who is going to lead the party? The dude that's been in politics all his life and is a lifelong party member, he's going to lead the party. The new party that's not like the old party. And this dude don't believe in reparations for blacks. He said that very clearly. He really doesn't have a firm grasp on what's happening with mass incarceration. It's more of a code word for him, something that sells politically and sounds good when he says it. But when pressed in one-on-one conversations about details, he was at a loss. So you could tell it was just campaign rhetoric that he was playing. So I felt used with the Sanders thing. I'm not following him. And as far as Cornel West is concerned, I've spoken about that brother before here on the radio. I don't want to trash him. I just don't trust him. I've seen him explain away the 13th Amendment like he was a slave catcher. Like he didn't know what it said. And he's supposed to be one of the brightest men on the planet with one of the best educations from one of these old white universities. Okay. Scotty, save me from myself.
Yeah, I feel you on Sanders and him not being the person that he portrayed himself to be. Does he have some good ideals politically, like with single-payer health care and and things of that nature. And I'll forever be grateful for him backing, that bill, Justice is Not for Sale. But since it failed, we just have not been hearing anything about slavery or getting rid of private prisons from him. And he's been out there on this so-called unity tour with Tom Perez, the Obama former labor secretary, who didn't have a problem with the slave labor in the prisons and what have you. So I mean, I feel where you're coming from on that, Max. But all we can do is continue to do what we do and just keep pushing this movement as far as possible and keep doing our best to recruit new abolitionists.
Well, with that said, Scotty, we'll take our break. When we come back on the other side, let's go and focus our attention on Wisconsin for a while. Because we've done that before. We need to do it again because of what's happening over there with that village idiot they call a sheriff. You're listening to New Abolitionist Radio on BlackTalkRadioNetwork.com. We'll take a few messages. We'll be right back after this.
Radio since 2008, providing new black media for the masses.
Welcome back to New Abolitionist Radio. In the chat room on the uberconference.com/Black Talk Radio Network page, I see Strategic Melanin said that they have reinstated stop risk. I'm not sure about that. I had to look into that and see if that is in fact the case.
Well, as I understood, what Tag was saying is that they say it's ended, but it has not. They still stopping and frisking.
The masters of evolving, right? Once you find something lucrative, you just rename the corporation and you keep doing what you were doing. That's not CCA anymore. Those are the bad guys. We're Core Civic now. We help you in mental illness cases, things like that. Yeah, we know how they roll, Scotty. They don't never let go of anything that's lucrative, no matter how evil it may be, like slavery. I want to get in Wisconsin because you reported on this about the man who died in the jail there. He was denied water for 7 days. I want to talk about some of the statistics in Wisconsin as well that shows you what's happening here across the United States of America and just how bad it has gotten, how institutionally racist it has become. The sheriff right now out in Milwaukee, Wisconsin is, of course, Sheriff David Clark, one of my top two people I detest the most. I think Scotty probably detests him as much as I do. Like the world really, man, it was a bad time when he got here. Things changed drastically. This dude, anyway, let me read this story because I could rant on him endlessly. From the Atlantic Black Star, it says prosecutors say Milwaukee County jail officers cut off an inmate's water for 7 consecutive days before the man died of dehydration. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel reports that Assistant District Attorney Kurt Bentley told jurors at an inquest Monday that Terrell Thomas was mentally unstable and unable to ask for help before he died in his cell in April of 2016. Thomas had been placed in solitary confinement after he used a mattress to flood his cell in another jail unit. The jury will issue a verdict on whether criminal charges are warranted in Thomas's death. The jury's recommendation is advisory. Separately, Thomas's children have filed a federal civil suit saying their father's treatment by Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark and his staff amounts to torture. You can get this story on New Abolitionist Radio. Scotty, you've talked about this story. Anything to add to it?
Yes. This guy, there's actually a criminal inquiry that's going on right now. I think they are just gathering evidence and then will possibly take that to a grand jury there in Milwaukee County. David Clark is a very unpopular person. I don't think he can no longer get by with just being a black man calling himself a Democrat while actually extolling the virtues of Donald Trump. And so people have really figured out that this guy, is a preeminent slave catcher in this country really, this guy is a sociopath. I follow him on Twitter. And this man be up at all times of the night. I sometimes have trouble sleeping. My body clock gets kind of mixed up, and I'll be up at all times of the night, so I'll try to do something. And this guy be up like 3 a.m. saying something crazy. And I'm like, this guy is, he's really a sociopath. And so there is a criminal investigation into that. And I won't be satisfied unless they indict him as part of it, because, he's at the top and the buck supposed to stop with him. And like I had tweeted to him, he never responds to me, but like I tweeted to him the other day, I was like, Big Mouth Sheriff, I didn't call him out his name. I said, Sheriff A. Clark always has something to say, but incredibly, he's quiet on this case. And I mentioned the victim's name, which I can't recall at this time. I think his last name is Thomas.
Thomas Kelly, you're talking about?
No, the victim, the guy that they withheld water from.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You lost me for a minute there, Scotty. My bad. Let me pull up the story from the Atlantic Star. It says, 6th John Kurt Bentley. Yes, Thomas.
Yeah, so, and this man, you had mentioned mental illness right before the break, and his family is saying that this guy was having a mental episode. And just think about it. Just think about being in your cell. They shut the water off, and they have it on video of the deputies shutting the water off of his cell, and then this man becoming, I think the proper word is emaciated, looking like a starving Ethiopian or something. And because of the lack of water, your body is over 80% water. You cannot live without water. I'm surprised that he lasted 7 days. Because if I remember correctly, they was like, you can die after 3 days of being deprived of water. And then, this man just becoming so weak, and then the other prisoners begging these deputies to get this man some water. This was murder. This was not manslaughter. This was not involuntary manslaughter. This was murder. Everybody knows that if you deprive somebody of water for long periods of time, that they're going to die. And so we'll see where this goes.
That's what they did to the woman here in South Carolina. We covered it a few weeks ago, where they locked her up here in South Carolina. Took her out of a hospital and locked her up, and they deprived her of water. She died of dehydration. You're right. This is murder, Scotty. In a person's mind listening to this story, you can imagine this happening in the 1800s or the 1700s or the 1600s. It's the same problems we faced then with these sociopathic slave catchers with no concern for human life at all, who are more concerned with their hunting dogs than they are with the men or women that are under their care, that they're being paid to make sure are in safe, secure condition.
And I believe it was last year that you had not just Mr. Thomas die, but you had 3 other people die as well, including a baby of a pregnant woman. She was pregnant when they arrested her, and then she started giving birth in the jail, and they refused her medical care, and the baby was born in jail and died later as a result of them depriving her of medical care. To me, that was intentional murder, and I want to know where all you pro-life people are.
Yeah, if that had happened outside of a jail or a prison, they would be charging somebody with murder. But inside the jail, apparently it's okay. And a jail is a place where you are innocent until proven guilty, if you might remember. So you're talking about a person that ain't even convicted of anything, that is given birth in jail and the baby dies. Yes, that is murder. And you know, we did some research Wisconsin over the years. About 4 years ago or 3 years ago, we did the Wisconsin is Ferguson and uncovered some horrific statistics. But I will read some of them here from BET.com, of all places. And this came from 2013. So you understand what's going on in the state of Wisconsin and Milwaukee in particular. Wisconsin has the highest black male incarceration rate in the nation, according to a study from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. The state's 12.8% incarceration rate is double the national rate, which is at 6.7%. Oklahoma follows Milwaukee at 9.7% and also surpasses the national rate. Most of the offenses are drug-related charges, according to the UWM Employment and Training Institute study. In the city of Milwaukee, incarceration seems to be an unfortunate fact of life for black men. More than one out of 2 of every black man in their 30s and half of black men in their 40s have been incarcerated in that city. 2/3 of these incarcerations were concentrated in the city's 6 poorest zip codes, those $1 million blocks we was telling you about. The prison population in Wisconsin has more than tripled since 1990, fueled by increased government funding for drug enforcement rather than treatment, and prison construction, 3-strike rules, mandatory minimum sentencing laws, truth in sentencing, replacing judicial discretion in setting punishments, concentrated policing in minority communities, and state incarceration for minor probation and supervision. The study said, here's some of the key points of the study. I will read them and then leave the rest for you to check out our new Abolitionist Radio. It says, because the vast majority of incarcerated black males are of working age, the study said they struggle finding jobs, especially given the recent recession. The study criticized past reports on the state's skill gaps for largely ignoring that population. Mark Maurer, a spokesperson for the Sentencing Project, said the findings could partly be due to involvement in crime, but also because of the effect of law enforcement policies. So the study found that 40% of incarcerated black males have offenses related to drugs. 40%, like 4 out of 10. Out of all Milwaukee County residents' imprisonments related to drugs since 1990, 82% of the offenders have been black males, according to the study. 82% in the entire city, people. While the study also found white male driving while intoxicated offenses are higher than among black males, the opposite is held true for drug offenses. We're going to read part of an article later on about a new study about who does the most drugs, and it shows you that these communities are being purposely targeted. And the last part here I'll read, it says the high black male incarceration rate in Milwaukee has been tied to the decline in black two-parent homes in the city. Past reports say that from 1970 to 2000, the number of black two-parent homes dropped from 64% to 28%. And you can check the rest of that out on New Abolitionist Radio. Scotty?
Yeah, it's no secret that, I mean, when you do these different studies, it shows that most people, the different categories of people under this racist system, all do drugs at similar rates. And while I'm not going to sit on this radio program and promote drug use, I will promote pro-choice. I'm pro-choice. If an adult wants to put something into their body, whether I agree with it or not, that's their right, and they can deal with the repercussions on their health, okay? But I don't feel like it is my place to say, hey, I want to lock you up and send you into slavery because you're using a substance that I don't like and that I wouldn't use. And as you point out, they don't put any kind of money into treatment. Most of the money goes into enforcement. And the drug war has been nothing but a new form of the black codes during the so-called Jim Crow era and what have you. And we know Nixon stated, his chief of staff, former chief of staff, stated that they started the drug war to target the blacks, as Michelle Alexander also documents in her book. So, you know, for those, because I know, Max, there are people out there that say things like, well, just don't do drugs. Well, you know, what if I tell you to stop eating bacon? Just stop eating bacon. Or stop doing whatever it is you like to do because I don't like you doing it. It's the same thing to me, man. It's all about a matter of free will, having free will. And so, you know, the drug war is a sham. As I posted on the page of one of our local newspaper who loves posting all the arrests on drugs, you know, for drugs in this county. And, you know, and I was surprised that a majority of the citizens who commented on it agree with me that the drug war is a sham and that the United States is the biggest drug trafficker on the planet. And these are facts. These aren't my opinions.
You know, when we did the Wisconsin is Ferguson report studying their prison system, Wisconsin doesn't have much more people in it than South Carolina. About the same amount of people. In South Carolina, our Department of Corrections budget, which is way too much, is near $750 million a year. In Wisconsin, it's $1.5 billion a year. That's a lot of money pouring into Wisconsin in order for them to have an 82% arrest rate of black men. And this new study that came out shows that what is occurring is that people in general, amongst black and whites, non-Hispanic whites, do drugs at hard drugs at a very high, much higher rate than blacks do. And this was a 12-year study that they did. And if that is the case, that means that you're not going to check, like we talked about the other day, with the people that are coming down Wall Street. You're not checking the suburbs. You're parking your ass in the hood, and you're picking from that group of people over and over and over again while giving a green light to everybody else. White privilege. The study, which took place over 12 years, found that the rates of hard drug abuse was highest among non-Hispanic whites, followed by Hispanics, than African Americans. The researchers found that whites were 30 times more likely to have cocaine addictions, 30 times more likely, 50 times more likely, I'm not talking one or two more times, 50 times more likely to develop an opiate use addiction, and 18 times more likely to have PCP use addiction than blacks. That is like outrageous. I mean, the reason it's so high is because you ain't arresting them. It's really just that simple. They're just doing it because they ain't nobody stopping them.
Which is their right. Hey, you know, again, I am pro-choice when it comes to drugs or any other substance that an adult makes a decision to use, as long as they are not harming another individual. That's the way I look at it, Max. But one thing about Wisconsin we should point out, and we have reported in the past, Scott Walker, is he still the governor? I believe he's still the governor of Wisconsin. But he started off in the Wisconsin state legislature, and he was solidly backed by, guess who? Private prison companies, and private prison companies sponsored much of the slave catching legislation that's in place that has led places like Milwaukee County to have the most incarcerated black males on the planet.
Yeah, matter of fact, he had this one thing where he was working on youth detention facilities there in Wisconsin, and looking at getting that money that way, like Chris Christie has been doing. The incarceration of teenagers is a highly lucrative thing. I mean, when you're talking about $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year to incarcerate an adult, children you can get as much as $350,000 a year. The national average is around $112,000 to $115,000 a year just to incarcerate one teenager. That is a huge booming business from the perspective of a slave catcher right now.
Yeah, so Wisconsin, I've been thinking about Rob lately, as I have not seen him call in to the program or heard him on any of the other programs that he normally calls into, but he lives in Wisconsin. He's also a victim of modern-day slavery and human trafficking, and the things that he would just tell us or share with us that's going on in that county. It's a very horrific place to live, especially if you're a black man.
Yeah, shout out to my sister Mary Watkins, who was out in that area. And hopefully Rob is okay. You're right, we haven't heard from him in a while. He was in distress the last time that we heard from him.
Well, Max, you want to move on to another story? Just want to I just want to remind listeners, coming up at 10 o'clock p.m. will be Mind, Body, and Spirit Radio, hosted by Black Rose and Featherlight.
Oh, no doubt, Scotty. If you'd like to cover the next story, I wanted to tell them about the epidemic of prosecutorial misconduct that's coming out of L.A. And we've covered L.A. sufficiently over the years to know that has been the case, and these charges have been put forward on a number of occasions with, overwhelming proof and evidence. But apparently there's a good old boys club going on in the prosecutorial pool out there in California, in LA, and they are covering up a lot of trash. Just what we talk about with exonerations and the stories of prosecutors in California hiding evidence, presenting false evidence, or doing things that are just outright illegal has been overwhelming. So if you have that one up there, Scotty?
Is this the story from 2015?
Yes, it points out the epidemic. As I said, we've been covering these over the years. We're kind of reiterating on the prosecutorial misconduct that is emanating out of our prosecutorial pools across America.
Now, see, this is just ignorance on the voters' part of this story right here. This is where you become, where identity politics, especially for black people, gets us in trouble, or being on the Democratic plantation and thinking that, they really care about people of color when they don't. Excuse me. At the time, Kamala Harris was the Attorney General. She's a person of color, a black woman.
What is she now?
She is now a senator, a U.S. senator. She's a U.S. senator. She's not in Congress. She's a U.S. senator now. So she's been rewarded for arguing against the release of prisoners to the Supreme Court by saying, if we let all these prisoners go, who's going to fight our fires? How are we going to replace this cheap labor pool? Which is what her office argued in federal court. So she was rewarded by that. Apparently, in that district that elected her to U.S. Senate had no idea who this woman is and what she stands for. They just looked at her, oh, that's a black woman, she's a Democrat, let's run out and vote for her. Because she's about justice. She knows what it's like to be a part of the oppressed class. See, this is the kind of stuff that gets you in trouble. All right? So the hearing seemed largely routine, and a state prosecutor approached the lectern. This is from the L.A. Times. Deputy Attorney General Kevin R. Vianna was there to urge 3 judges on the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to uphold murder convictions against Johnny Baca for 2 1995 killings in Riverside County. Other courts had already determined that prosecutors had presented false evidence in Baca's trial, but upheld the verdicts anyway. Viana had barely started his argument when the pummeling began. Give me just a second as I try to navigate this site. Very busy site, lots of movement. Judge Alex, okay, matter of fact, let's go ahead and give a listen to them blasting Attorney General Kamala D. Harris. See if I can get this to play here.
That's about a 40-minute video. But we'll get some of it.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
It says it begins around the 1550 mark when they start calling her out. All right. This site is really.
All right. Cool.
It's really busy. I'm serious. I'm having trouble. Okay, here we go. All right. Let's see if we can get it to load up. We'll jump to the 1550 mark so we can hear what these judges had to say about the prosecutorial misconduct and the lack of any kind of discipline by the attorney generals. So give me just a second. I will get there. Okay, here we go. Let's see. 1550. Just a second. I apologize. Websites have so much going on that it's hard to navigate.
Yeah, especially like Atlantic Black Star, man, the ads and stuff that go on, the videos that pop up automatically, things like that.
We'll hear from the state.
Good morning, Your Honor. May it please the court. Magistrate Judge Walls said that this case leaves a sour taste in his mouth. It certainly should. A number of things happened that should have not happened, and we're not here to defend them.
Do you concede, let me just start right out, do you concede that Mr. Spira lied on the stand?
I am not certain that he lied. I think he had some genuine confusion about what happened at the sentencing hearing, because he referred in his testimony in the evidentiary hearing in the district court. He said there were discussions off the record and on the record. I think he is either correct or firmly believes that there was a misunderstanding among the parties about a change in the law that affected the number of sentence credits that he could get following his conviction for voluntary manslaughter.
So you don't concede that he lied?
I think it's not clear, but I certainly recognize that Magistrate Judge Walls thinks he lied in the state court.
The Court of Appeal doesn't conclude he lied.
Testimony, whether or not he did it intentionally?
As a central matter, I don't think it matters greatly whether Mr. Spira lied or whether he was mistaken. The Court of Appeal was correct and did not condone the fact that the jury was misled about the circumstances of Mr. Baca's testimony. That is, it was incorrect at the time of Baca's second trial to say that Melendez had never asked for a benefit. Indeed, his counsel quite clearly had asked for a benefit. And it was incorrect to say that he'd never received a benefit, because the trial court made clear that its consideration of the benefit was that he had testified at length.
Yeah. Should we go forward on the assumption that he lied? That's the way I read the Court of Appeal opinion. The Court of Appeal, as I read that, says that Mr. Spira lied on the stand.
Well, they called it fantasy, but I think it's certainly clear that they thought his testimony was inconsistent with the actual facts.
Has he been prosecuted for perjury?
He hasn't been prosecuted for perjury.
And why is that?
I don't know the answer to that, Your Honor.
It's a little disconcerting when the state puts on evidence. The evidence turns out to be fabricated. Nothing happens to the lawyer, and nothing happens to the witness. And so I have to sort of doubt the sincerity of the state when it says this was a big mistake. I would think that if somebody lied on the stand right there in a criminal case, that the first thing that would happen is that there would be a prosecution of the witness, and if the lawyer had any complicity in it, that lawyer would get disbarred. Has there been any effort in that regard?
I don't disagree with your statement that perjury should be prosecuted. I do disagree with the premise that perjury occurred because, as I said, I'm not sure. I think Spiro was confused at his testimony.
The Court of Appeal basically said it occurred. The State Court of Appeal, and then analyzed the prejudice.
Yes, Your Honor, although if I might note one thing, and that is
How about the lawyer?
Pardon me?
How about the lawyer?
Which lawyer? Mr.
The prosecutor who put on the...
Weingrad?
Yeah.
Mr. Weingrad's retired now, and he never was disciplined either for BACA 1, where he was severely criticized for the evidence that he put on about BACA's prior conviction, prior child sex conviction. And
why is that? Why was he not...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there because the website is just very busy. But what they were talking about was the prosecutor knowingly putting on a person who said that he hired Baca to murder somebody, and it turned out to be a false testimony, and the person was not prosecuted for perjury, and the prosecutor wasn't disciplined. But this is not just focusing on this one case, but there was a pattern of prosecutorial misconduct, malfeasance, criminal conspiracies to throw people into slavery using falsified evidence, and nothing ever happens to these people. They're allowed to retire, draw their little pensions, and probably sitting somewhere on a cabin on the lake, ready to go fishing. And so, again, this is why it is important. If you're going to participate in politics, and I know politics isn't everybody's thing. In fact, the majority of people in this country do not vote. But if you're going to vote, you ought to know these sort of things or these involvements that the candidates that you're voting for played a role in. And Kamala Harris played a role in this. She was the chief law enforcement officer in California. Again, I already stated to you that when there was a case brought before the U.S. Supreme Court about overcrowding in prisons, which resulted in the Supreme Court ordering them to reduce overcrowding in California prisoners, and her office argued that, hey, what would we do for cheap labor? In other words, slave labor. What would we do? And then all of this prosecutorial misconduct going on in the state, and yet none of these prosecutors were disciplined. But yet enough people voted for this woman to now make her part of the U.S. Senate.
See, she ran on this idea that she was going in to fight private prisons. These are quotes from her very page, her own page, Kamala Harris on Twitter.
And we know how, Max, I'm glad you brought that up. And what was their remedy, as we reported on, to comply with the Supreme Court order? Did they let elderly prisoners go? Did they let nonviolent so-called drug offenders go? No. They hired the GEO group, which we heard the GEO group talk about it before it was made public on one of their earnings calls that we spy on.
That's what they did. And she rode in on this train of fighting for police reform, criminal justice reform. She's quoted as saying, private prisons house 70% of immigrants awaiting enforcement. We must put an end to the prison industrial complex. She said, the truth is, private prison contracts only benefit the corporations that run them. So I would recommend following the money. Well, we did follow the money, Kamala. And we talked about it here on New Abolitionist Radio. Like Scotty said, your department pushed back against a federal order to expand an early parole program, arguing that it would deplete your stock of cheap prison labor, especially inmates who fight wildfires. And you even put a value on people's lives, saying it was $1 billion in salaries that California would have to pay if they didn't use prison slave labor. See, that's that political forked tongue going on. Say one thing, do another. let prosecutors get away with destroying people's lives, and then talk about how you're going to fight against that.
This is why as I was listening to Tanya Free and friends earlier today, and they were talking about the need for black unity. And excuse me, Max. Over here about to choke, man. I'm sorry. What was I saying, Max? I'm sorry.
About unity?
Yes, they were discussing black unity today and the need for black unity so that we can, solve the problems that ails us. And I was just thinking to myself, and I said it before, I don't unify with people based on skin color, because then that means then I would be unifying with someone like Kamala Harris. I would rather unify with people based on truth and justice. That's what I'm looking to unify with people around, not skin color. Okay, while I am a proud black man and have always strongly identified myself with the black community, I know that's a fallacy to think that we can unify with people solely based on skin color when we have what I term proxy racists who are helping to continue modern day slavery and human trafficking. And like you said, Max, they'll say something in public as they're campaigning, but they're saying something else in court, in her case, in trying to keep the slaves on the plantation.
Indeed. In this article that came out from Occupy Wall Street, where they say how to purchase prisoners, they tell you how it's done, which is what we are seeing these former Department of Justice employees actually do. They're making these transitions from going from public life involved, whether it be in politics or the Department of Justice, and then taking that expertise and joining prison companies. They say beyond the model legislation produced by Alex, CCA also influences government by hiring former politicians and infiltrating state agencies with its own employees. Company's chief correction officer, Harley G. Lappin, for example, joined CCA after 25 years with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, serving as the agency's director during his final 8 years there. Perhaps not coincidentally, Lappin is the writer of the aforementioned letter offering to buy states' detention centers. That's how they do it. These lobbyists, they go in and they promise these people jobs at the end of their tenure. And then they bring them in as lobbyists. And the next thing you know, you're hearing someone like Rudy Giuliani, who now is working with private prisons, talk about how black people are criminals and helping to put together policies indirectly that lead to mass arrests like what's happening now with the raids at Wormwood.
I just wish people, Max, would do their research, man. That's all. I just want people to research. If you're going to participate in politics, be a responsible voter and just don't be casting your vote based on a skin color or a letter behind somebody's name. Research these people to see what they have actually done as opposed to what they're telling you.
Yeah, and then you can look at some of these groups that are supposed to be out there representing justice, the Constitution, the law, and see what they're doing, and you can see what direction we're going in and how many FKs people actually give here in America.
Word.
With the Supreme Court decision that just came out recently in regards to the testimony of a police in a situation where it's his word versus yours. And it doesn't matter how upstanding a citizen you are. It doesn't matter any kind of credentials. Doesn't matter if you don't have any drugs in your system, or if you're not armed or anything. According to this new Supreme Court decision, if a cop shoots you in the back and you are unarmed and the only witnesses there are you and him, it's your word, it's his word against yours, he wins every time. There's not even a need for a hearing. Literally, you don't need a hearing. The cop said it, it's true. End of conversation. He shot you because he needed to shoot you. That's the new Supreme Court ruling that was just announced Monday. And it's regarding this case of Mr. Salazar Limon, the lower court decision holding Salazar Limon will not even receive a full trial, will stand without the Supreme Court hearing the case. Salazar Lyman, I guess, versus City of Houston turns upon a very real dispute over just how an officer decided that shooting an unarmed man in the back was the correct course of action. As Justice Sonia Sotomayor explains, Salazar Lamont. Eventually, the officer tried to put Salazar Lamont in handcuffs, but the drunk driver struggled free and started to walk back to his truck. That's where the two men's stories significantly diverge. According to Salazar Lamont, Sotomayor writes the cop shot him immediately, at most within seconds, after commanding him to stop walking. The officer, by contrast, claims that Salazar Lamont raised his hands towards his waistband as if for a weapon, shortly before the officer pulled the trigger. It's not at all clear which one of these men is telling the truth, though Sotomayor rarely arches notes in a footnote that, rather archly noted in a footnote that some commentators have observed the increasing frequency of incidents in which unarmed men allegedly reach for empty waistbands when facing armed officers. But under a fairly basic legal concept taught to every first-year law student, this lack of clarity should entitle Salazar Lamont to a full trial to determine what happened. You can read the rest on New Abolitionist Radio. It's pretty much cut and dry. The Supreme Court has decided, in the case of the officer's word against yours, the officer is going to win before a trial even occurs, hence making a trial unnecessary.
Well, Max, I think we should go ahead and jump to our segments because we only got like 15 minutes left.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, indeed, brother. I'm sorry about that. I carried that a little further over than I shouldn't, and I forgot. I'll share the stories about what's going on, the jails in Rikers and Alabama's and the prisons where women are being forced to have sex with officers for pads, tampons, like they're bargaining chips. Make sure you check that out on New Abolitionist.
Again, that's one of those stories that show you that everything you think about that went on plantations pre-1865 are still going on today.
Right. And the other story that people should check out is the story that you shared from Dallas, where the 18-year-old boy, the information just recently came out. There's a audio showing that these cops were repeatedly tasing him in his groin, laughing about it, and talking about how they were going to kill him. An 18-year-old kid, 5 foot tall.
And the Justice Department helped cover it up. It's a damn shame, man. It's just a damn shame. Well, we'll go into our first segment of the final of the evening, and it is a rider of the 21st Century Underground Railroad. And this week, our story comes out of the New York Times, and it says, Louisiana has dismissed all charges. Oh, by the way, this is for April 20th of 2017. Louisiana has dismissed all charges against a man who spent several years on death row after his infant son died in 2012 in a case that drew national attention to a parish that sentenced young black men to death at an unusually high rate. Rodriguez Crawford, 28, a resident of Caddo Parish, Louisiana, in the northwestern corner of the state, was sentenced to death in 2013 after prosecutors argued that he had suffocated his son. But Louisiana Supreme Court threw out his conviction in November after finding that the jury selection in the case may have been racially biased. Mr. Crawford was released from prison later that month. In a statement announcing that it would not retry Mr. Crawford, the Caddo Parish District Attorney's Office acknowledged evidence suggesting that at the time of his death, his son had pneumonia and bacteria in his blood that indicated sepsis. The state said that it would not meet the burden of proof to gain a new conviction for Mr. Crawford. Cecilia Capel, one of Mr. Crawford's lawyers, described him in an interview on Thursday as someone who should never have been facing such a stark sentence to begin with. And we here at New Abolitionist Radio salute you. Welcome to freedom, Brother Rodriguez Crawford. Man. Welcome to freedom.
Accused of killing your own child and then sitting on death row. behind an all-white jury. Wow.
Disgusting place we live, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just terrible, man. And people think that this isn't happening. In Arkansas, they're killing men now by the bunches. Some of them who are potentially innocent, like this man right here.
And that story in Arkansas, they refuse to even test the DNA evidence that was uncovered. Oh, we ain't gonna bother with that. Let's just go on and kill them. Let's just put them to death. No,
they've already killed one man.
Yeah,
all because the drugs that they use now, the company will not supply anymore, and the drugs they have are about to or have expired. They killed the first man 4 minutes before the drugs officially expired, like the drugs will blow up. It just wouldn't be legal anymore. And they killed the first man 4 minutes before it happened. Then they killed two in a row, which is the first time they've done anything like that anywhere in this country in the past 18 years.
Again, I don't mean to sound like a cynic, but when I hear people talk about how great the United States is, I'm like, man, where do you live? With your head buried in the sand? But yeah, let's move to the next one.
The next segment,
the
which
history
is our new
of rebellion.
For freedom's sake.
Yeah,
a history of rebellion. This week it's Gabriel's Conspiracy, 1800. Born prophetically in 1776 on the Prosser Plantation. Now remember, this is Gabriel Prosser, just 6 miles north of Richmond, Virginia, and home to, use the term loosely, to 53 slaves. A slave named Gabriel would hatch a plot with freedom as his goal that was emblematic of the era which he lived. A skilled blacksmith who stood more than 6 feet tall and dressed in fine clothes when he was away from the forge, Gabriel cut an imposing figure. But what distinguished him more than his physical bearing was his ability to read and write. Only 5% of Southern slaves were literate. Other slaves looked up to men like Gabriel, and Gabriel himself found inspiration in the French and Saint Dominique revolutions of 1789. He imbibed the political fervor of the era and concluded, albeit erroneously, that Jeffersonian democratic ideology encompassed the interests of black slaves and white working men alike, who, united, could oppose the oppressive Federalist merchant class. Man, it was about capitalism then, wasn't it? Spurred on by 2 liberty-minded French soldiers he met in a tavern, Gabriel began to formulate a plan, enlisting his brother Solomon and another servant on the Prosser Plantation in his fight for freedom. Word quickly spread to Richmond, other nearby towns and plantations, and well beyond to Petersburg and Norfolk, via free and enslaved blacks who worked the waterways. Gabriel took a tremendous risk in letting so many people learn of his plans. It was necessary as a means of attracting supporters, but it also exposed him to the possibility of betrayal. Regardless, Gabriel persevered, aiming to rally at least 1,000 slaves to his banner of death or liberty, an inversion of the famed cry of the slave-holding revolutionary Patrick Henry. With incredible daring and naivety, Gabriel determined to march to Richmond, take the armory, and hold Governor James Monroe hostage until the merchant class bent to the rebels' demands of equal rights for all. He planned his uprising for August 30th and publicized it well. But on that day, one of the worst thunderstorms in recent memory pummeled Virginia, washing away roads and making travel all but impossible. Undeterred, Gabriel believed that only a small band was necessary to carry out the plan, but many of his followers lost faith, and he was betrayed by a slave named Pharaoh, who feared retribution if the plot failed. The rebellion was barely underway when the state captured Gabriel and several co-conspirators, 25 African Americans worth about $9,000 or so, money that cash-strapped Virginia surely thought it could ill afford, were hanged together before Gabriel went to the gallows and was executed alone. We here at New Abolitionist Radio remember the rebellion of Gabriel's Conspiracy.
Salute.
Salute, brother. There you have it. The last one is up to you, Scotty Reed. Abolitionists in Profile, remembering those from the past and present who have given it all in order to fight against legalized slavery and human trafficking.
Our abolitionist in Profile is William Steele. He was born October the 7th, 1821, and transitioned on July 14th, 1902. He was an African-American abolitionist in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, conductor on the Underground Railroad, a businessman, writer, historian, and civil rights activist. Before the American Civil War, Steele was chairman of the Vigilance Committee of the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society and directly aided fugitive slaves and kept records to help families reunite. After the war, he remained an important businessman and philanthropist, as well as used his meticulous records to write an account of the underground system and the experiences of many refugee slaves entitled The Underground Railroad Records. In 1847, 3 years after settling in Philadelphia, he began working as a clerk for the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society when Philadelphia abolitionists organized a vigilance committee to directly aid escaped slaves who had reached the city. Steele became its chairman. By the 1850s, Steele was one of the leaders of Philadelphia's African-American community. In 1855, he participated in the nationally covered rescue of Jane Johnson, a slave who sought help from the society in gaining freedom while passing through Philadelphia with her master, John Hill Wheeler, newly appointed U.S. minister to Nicaragua. Steele and others liberated her and her two sons under Pennsylvania law, which held that slaves brought to the free state voluntarily by a slaveholder could choose freedom. Her master sued him and 5 other African Americans for assault and kidnapping in a high-profile case in August 1855. Jane Johnson returned to Philadelphia from New York and testified in court as to her independence in choosing freedom, winning acquittal for Steele and 4 others, and reduced sentences for the last 2. In 1859, Steele challenged the segregation of the city's public transit system, which had separate seating for whites and blacks. He kept lobbying, and in 1865, the Pennsylvania legislature passed a law to integrate streetcars across the strait. Often called the father of the Underground Railroad, Steele helped as many as 800 slaves escape to freedom. He interviewed each person and kept careful records, including a brief biography and the destination for each, along with any aliases adopted. He kept his records carefully hidden, but knew the accounts would be critical in aiding the future reunion of family members who became separated under slavery, which he had learned when he aided his own brother Peter, whom he had never met before. Steele worked with other Underground Railroad agents operating in the South, including in Virginia ports, nearby Delaware and Maryland, and in many counties in southern Pennsylvania. His network to freedom also included agents in New Jersey, New York, New England, and Canada. Conductor Harriet Tubman traveled through his office with fellow passengers on several occasions during the 1850s. Steele also forged a connection with the family of John Brown and sheltered several of Brown's associates fleeing the 1859 raid on Harper's Ferry. New Abolitionist Radio salutes William Steele.
Salute. William Steele is one of the characters being portrayed now in Underground.
I was thinking that, man, that they probably based that series on his book, on his records.
Right. Yeah, he's being well played, or he was being well played in that series. If you haven't seen Underground, you should check it out. In any case, Scotty, we have completed another broadcast of New Abolitionist Radio here in our 5th year, coming up on our anniversary, June 13th, I believe. And I think we're going to have a party that day, brother. So it's worth celebrating.
Most certainly. And it's certainly been a pleasure working with you and Johanna, who couldn't join us tonight, over the years, and just doing our best to make the public aware that slavery was never abolished and it is still with us, and is going to take a similar effort like William Steele's and the other abolitionists of his day to finally bring a conclusion to their work through our hands.
Amen, brother. Amen. So I know you've got the next program coming up here on BlackTalkRadioNetwork.com. I want to thank everybody for listening this evening. I want to thank our guests who came in as well. And I want to remind you that our New Abolitionist Radio, you can find the page where you can find myself and Tribal Reign this Saturday in Asheville, North Carolina, working with the local Black Lives Matter chapter, as well as with the local Quakers organization and citizen advocates and activists. Will be reviewing the film the 13th and then having an open discussion afterward, which includes poetry. So if you're in the Asheville area, check us out there. The link is on New Abolitionist Radio on Facebook. Scotty, any last words?
Yes, I just want to thank Tag and Rian for joining us during the first hour to highlight the plight of the Bronx 120, a group of young people who are being targeted with I wouldn't call it a new tactic, but being targeted with RICO charges when RICO charges were originally brought about to target real international criminal organizations like the mafia, but now they are using them to target young people. So just want to thank them for their work and want to remind you of their rally that will take place tomorrow at the courthouse, steps of the courthouse in NYC. And we have also posted that information on New Abolitionist Radio page. So thank you again to our guests tonight. Max.
Yes, sir. Remember, August 19th, 2017, the Millions for Prisoners March on Human Rights March on Washington. If you're not involved yet, it's getting late. Get involved now. Show your support. Sign up on the page. I am weubuntu.com. Register your organizations as supporters and make plans to attend the event. In order to have a Millions Prisoners March on Washington, we need millions. So come on out, bring everybody you know, bring the kids, bring the side chicks, the side guys, bring them all. I'm just saying. So funny, but I'm just saying. And remember this above everything else. Abolition is a reason for a revolution, so we can finally know some peace. Peace.
Rise up, 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 rise up. Showtime. Just lift your eyes up, let your wise rise up. See the signs of the times. If it's time, rise up, rise up. When death and hell dwell among all God's people, when those we chose and trusted have become completely corrupted and inherently evil, when the feast that feeds you starves our father's children, when snuff, porn, and pedo forms begin to get top billing, rise up. When famine claims millions, when justice gives blind eyes to billions, when the Lord's anger is no longer feared, if his protection